So we'll start with Church A. Your question is, describe what the people of Malta were known to be. Then compare the people of Malta with the Roman soldiers and sailors. Describe all the things that the people of Malta did for those shipwrecked. How do we discover the burning bush in the actions of the people of Malta? Explain the significance of the earthquake and the fire and the destruction of Jericho and its relation to our lives. Explain the significance of the ram's horn blowing when the walls fell and its meaning to us.
Time's up.
The author, Father Lev Gillet, first starts by comparing the welcomed versus the welcomers. St. Paul he was a prisoner and he was with criminals and he was being transferred from Palestine to Rome. But on the way they became shipwrecked and they ended up, the sailors and the Roman soldiers, they just wanted to kill them. They didn't have compassion for them because they considered them all to be prisoners and criminals, and they weren't worthy. But when they did land on the island of Malta, the people of Malta, the Maltese, they lit them a great fire. And there's a verse in Acts 28, and it says, "The barbarians showed us no little kindness, for they kindled us a great fire, and they received us everyone into their homes." So the people, even though they were considered barbarians, they, first of all, what they considered barbarians back then was people, anyone who didn't speak Latin or Greek and was considered inferior to the Roman Empire, that was considered a barbarian. So the people of Malta, in their eyes and in the eyes of St. Paul, were all considered barbarians. But despite when they landed on shore, when they became shipwrecked, they lit a great fire for them. He says that the Hebrew word that was used is not the regular word for fire, but it's great fire, which brings us back to the burning bush. Another thing that the Maltese did was that they received every single person into their home, including St. Paul. He says that, he emphasizes the point that that the barbarians showed them no little kindness, saying that they took the extra step and they took that extra mile. And when Christ was preaching about going that extra step with everybody to show his limitless love, he asked them, he's like, what do ye more than the others? Meaning that if you love your friends and your family, well, non-Christians do the same thing and non-believers. But because you're a follower of me and a follower of Christ, then you have to do more and love your enemies. Another example that Father Lev Gillet gives is another example of limitless love. He says that the people of Malta, this was just the first level of the burning bush that we could go to of limitless love. But he compares the example of the parable of the Samaritan woman. In the parable of the Samaritan woman, he took the wounded man into an inn, and he said to him that I will repay. He paid for him, and he said, when I come back, I will repay thee whatsoever you spend on him. And Lev Gillet focuses on the word whatsoever. He's saying that his limitless love was without limits at all, without any reservations whatsoever. So he says that at the end of each parable, that's what it's calling us to do. It's calling us to that whatsoever, to take that extra mile and to take that extra step.
How is Jericho is the antithesis of the burning bush? Well, Jericho, it's you and me, it's ourselves. And the burning bush represents the unlimited less love from God, and it shows us Jericho, the walls of Jericho, while they have their walls or their doors closed, and they didn't want to accept anyone from outside. So God had the burning bush as to show the limited less love to that, and explains the significance of the earthquakes and the fire in this direction of Jericho and its relation to ourselves. again, uh, the two, the earthquake and the fire was the two things that the oncologist found. I don't know, and the fire was caused. The fire was caused from the earthquake that happened, and that shows us that the earthquakes. God had to do the earthquake so He can shake us and wakes us and make us feel the like a fire, but like it's an inner fire, not a fire that can burn us, and. And that also shows us the limitless love from God to us, and explains the significance of the ram's horn blowing when the walls fell, and its meaning to us. Well, the ram's horn, it's a sound that it's really important for the rams and the Jews.
Explain in detail the heresy of Manichaeism. Church B, Lyndon. Explain in detail the heresy of Gnosticism.
Explain in detail the heresy of Manichaeism. Manichaeism was a heresy specifically against the nature of Jesus. They felt that the nature of Jesus was like a phantom or a ghost. It was around the 300s, 4th century AD, and one of the followers who was known to follow Manichaeism for about 9 years was St. Augustine. He was waiting for Bishop Faustus, and he realized that what they were saying was wrong eventually. Manichaeism believes in some type of big cosmic battle between a very big good power and a big evil power. So they felt like God was the good and He was fighting some type of evil source, not understanding that God is like all goodness. So that they felt that these two sources were at war with one another. They felt that evil was actually material. They didn't understand that evil wasn't a substance; it was just the lack of the good. They also believed that evil, since it was material, it can go inside of things, like it was in food, so they didn't eat any meat, they only ate vegetables. They also believed that the flesh was bad, the body was bad, so they didn't engage in sexual acts. But at the same time, it was a lot of hypocrisy, because even though they only ate vegetables or they didn't engage in these things, they dressed very elaborately, they ate very elaborately. So eventually, for example, Augustine saw that it was just a bunch of hypocrisy, and they weren't able to answer their questions. So they had a lot of backwards ideas, again, on the nature of Jesus, because they didn't understand that He was the Son of God, because they thought that He couldn't be human, because when evil was entering into the world, they said, if flesh is bad and the body is bad, then how can Jesus be fully human, fully divine? They didn't understand that Jesus' nature is one substance that was combining His divine and human nature. They thought that there's no way that He could be a human. So instead they said that when He was on the cross, He was just some type of phantom that disappeared. So their ideas of evil was distorted, because they thought that evil was materialistic. They didn't understand that God was spirit. So they thought that it was possible that a cosmic source, like an evil source, was able to war or fight against a good source. They didn't know that God, being all good, that He conquers everything, and that there was no conflict between the two. And the other problem with their heresy is that evil is not materialistic. Evil is not material. Evil is just simply the lack of the good. Manichaeism eventually dispersed. It passed away. It was mostly prevalent in North Africa, in areas like Carthage, and that's current-day Algeria.
The question is, explain in detail the heresy of Gnosticism. It was that they didn't believe that the Virgin Mary still remained a virgin even after childbirth, that it didn't make sense that her womb was never opened, and even with all the proof, they still didn't want to believe it, and they said it was impossible.
Church B, this question is from What is Man? His Holiness makes the argument that the rational of man is affected by various influences. Provide two ways of how ignorance occur or happen in man, and what it leads into. From the book, provide and explain an example of the most serious condition or kind of ignorance and its consequences. Church A, His Holiness makes the argument that the rational of man is affected by various influences. Provide three ways of how doubt occurs or happens in man from within him. From the book, provide and explain an example of the most serious condition or kind of doubt. Time is up.
His Holiness makes the argument that the rational of man is affected by various influences. One of them is ignorance. Two ways of how ignorance occurred happen in man and what it leads to. The first way is the lack of knowledge, or as as the Lord says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So when we have no idea what we're doing, we might be doing many wrong things. Second example is the wrong knowledge. For example, St. Paul, who was a godly man, but he behaved in a wrong way out of ignorance. And as he said, he counted me faithful, accepted me into his ministry, although I was formerly a blasphemer, a prosecutor, an insolent man. But I obtained mercy because I did this ignorantly, in unbelief.
He provides three examples of how doubt can occur in a man from within him. One of the examples is how a man can begin to doubt what people tell him and doubt knowledge, even if it's correct knowledge. He'll doubt what they tell him, and he'll be almost stubborn in what they tell him, and he'll be doubtful, and he loses trust for many of the people that are around him, and it can also cause doubt with his family or social relations. This is a very dangerous type of doubt because the Pope says that this disrupts a lot of families and causes a lot of turmoil in families. And he gives an example of a daughter who doubts the love of her father. And another example, which he says is a very dangerous type of doubt, is doubt of your faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, and doubt the love of Jesus Christ for you. And this is the most serious condition or kind of doubt. And an example of this is, for example, an atheist who doubts the existence of God. This is a very dangerous type of doubt because you're basically risking your salvation and the love of Jesus Christ.
Okay. Good job to both teams. Church B, St. Mary and St. Bishoy Linden, you had 56 points. St. George Brooklyn, you had 56 points. So this round was a tie.